In 2017, I had what to date was the worst Christmas of my life. It was Dave's last Christmas. Most of you know my story. My husband of 24 years was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in July of 2015. It's a terrible diagnosis, one that does not allow for much hope. Dave lost his battle with pancreatic cancer in February of 2018. By Christmas of 2017, he and I knew the fight was almost over. He was so sick. He'd been fighting for over 2 years and wanted nothing more than to live. The chemo he was on at the time was making my sharply intelligent husband do things like try to answer the TV remote when the phone rang. It was clear that things were going downhill. That's a hard enough thing to face. But facing it at the holidays has put a shadow over this time of year I'm not sure I'll ever recover from. For sure, I can say that this time of year will never be the same. I've not put up a Christmas tree since 2017, and I won't say never, but getting a Christmas card for me in the future does not seem likely. When facing our family's first Christmas in 2018 without Dave, I knew I needed to skip Christmas. I took my 2 kids on a big 5-star trip to Costa Rica. It still warms my heart and makes me smile that my 2 20-something kids spent their New Year's Eve with their mom, saying goodbye to a crummy, life-altering 2018 and welcoming in 2019 while the 3 of us still grieved. On that trip, I started to think about the 1-year anniversary of Dave's death coming up. I'd been grieving hard, and I was beginning to think about trying to find my way in a world that no longer made sense to me. I was doing a lot of reading, writing, praying, trying to keep my head above the waters of grief that felt like they were going to drown me at times. I knew I had to find a way forward. Much of my time outside of my workday was spent thinking about, reading about, talking about grief. Sheryl Sandberg's book, Option B, was helpful, but the lifeline came in a closed Facebook group called Option B, Coping with Grief. There's a man, Jim, who posts there regularly. He's over 30 years beyond the loss of his wife, and he had 2 little kids when he lost her. When suffering, if you look around, you can always find somebody that you're grateful to not be. At least I did not have little kids when Dave died. Jim's postings talked about how things felt in the beginning, how they got better each year, and how life continued. He also talked about how the grief never went away. I kept following and reading posts and found Tracey. Her post touched my soul. I sent her a message thanking her, and she invited me to another Facebook group, Beautiful Ramblings. Tracey and the fellow ramblers changed my life. In that group, I heard from women and men who were putting their lives together piece by piece, sometimes taking huge steps backwards. There were images and memes that spoke to my lived experience. And then Tracey posted something about being a #joy seeker. The phrase resonated with me immediately. A joy seeker. Since Dave died, I've been living for both of us. He wanted to live more than anything, and I can live with him in my heart and in my soul. Being a #joy seeker was something I could do. I've lived through tragedy, and I'm going to choose joy each and every moment that I can. This February, it will be 4 years since Dave died. By making joy a priority, my path has taken me places I would have never imagined, places I'll tell you about sometime. I choose joy. I seek joy. I know in my bones, in my mind, and in my soul, how a moment in time can take breath and life away. I choose joy. Nothing else makes sense to me. There are times when sadness comes and sits on my shoulder and settles over my heart. That's okay, because I know when I'm ready, I will choose joy again and again. There is nothing better I could do to honor my beloved husband.
I'd like to thank Tracey for the reflection. Thank you, Tracey. And the idea of choosing joy in difficult times reminds me of a story from Reverend Bill Clark. He was a Unitarian Universalist minister who worked a lot with AIDS patients. And he was really struggling during the real heights of the AIDS epidemic, and he was devastated by what he was experiencing. And many of you maybe remember that, especially in the Bay Area, it was horrific. And he was walking along the beach, and he was really depressed one day, and he heard this person shouting, "Joy! Joy!" And he was really quite taken aback. And then he realized that, that's what we need to do. We need to shout joy, because the very act of calling joy means that we know it's out there. You can choose it, you can seek it, as Tracey was talking about. But then he realized that the man on the beach had a dog named Joy, and he was just calling it. But one of the things I like about that video, we're talking about the movement of joy and how joy can bring movement. And, I think dancing can be one of the most expressive forms of joy. I mean, and I'm not going to dance yet, so you're quite lucky. So, but I thought since it is about movement, I thought I would mime my whole sermon. So I'm joking. Yeah, mime never gets a laugh, does it? But when I was reading this thing about, are you a creator of joy? Are you a receiver of joy? Are you a noticer of joy? Or are you a spreader of joy? I invite you to reflect on that. Are you a creator? Are you a receiver? Are you a noticer? Or are you a spreader of joy? Or, as Tracey so profoundly asked, are you a seeker of joy? Are you willing to choose joy? I want to explore the idea of creating joy, because in that video, you saw that person, he was just embracing and I want to acknowledge the video uses the term nut, and that's inappropriate. I know he was kind of praising him, but that's an inappropriate term to use. But that person, he was shirtless, he was enjoying himself, he was so into the music. For the most part, I think he was oblivious of all around him, and I think that's something what joy is. Joy is not something like, I'm going to be joyful now. You're into doing something else that brings you joy, and it's almost a separate response to what you're doing. I think you can choose to be open for it, and you can choose to embrace it, and you can choose to seek it. But you can't really choose joy itself. It's something that you experience while doing something else. And that shirtless guy was out there enjoying probably his favorite band, playing his favorite song. He might have had some chemical help, I don't know. But he really did inspire. He looked like he was having fun. And I love the idea it's the follower who's the more courageous. That first person was just enjoying himself. The follower was the one that stood up and joined him. And it was interesting that he embraced, the shirtless guy embraced the new, and that's the idea of leadership. And I love that. And then you saw how more and more people joined. And I really admire that. And I also acknowledge that I struggle with dancing in public. I struggle with singing in public. I grew up, especially as a teenager, I went through a highly, highly self-conscious time. So it's kind of ironic I end up talking in public once a week now. It's an interesting career choice. But I played sports competitively in public, and that was okay because I knew what I was doing. There was something about dancing or singing that seems more emotionally expressive, seems riskier, and takes more courage. And I struggle with that. So I don't even think I would have been the follower there. Maybe the crowd at the very end, half an hour later, I might get up and do it. But I really like, why does that hesitancy, why does that worrying about the expectations of people I don't know stop me from expressing joy? Because if we express joy, we're creating joy and we're sharing joy. But I think so many of our inhibitions stop us. I think it's really worth exploring that. And I even noticed it a few weeks ago. I went with some friends to see the David Byrne movie, American Utopia. It was on one night in the theatre. And so a bunch of us, I said, I really want to go, and I let my friends know. And we went up to San Francisco to see it. But we all got separate seats, and we ended up all socially distanced, as the mode it was. But you know, during it, there was a woman at the end of the aisle that was up dancing, because it's quite a high energy. It's a film of his Broadway show. David Byrne was the lead singer for Talking Heads, who many of you know. And so it's very high energy, and there was people dancing in the aisle. And I was kind of jealous of them, that they were willing to do that. But I wasn't willing to do that, even though I love that music. And if I'm home by myself, I'll dance. But the idea of dancing in front of strangers or friends was too much. My inhibition stopped me from fully embodying and embracing my joy. And then I noticed one of my friends, who's one of the shyest and quietest guys, he was up dancing at the end. And still, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And the author William Watson Pookie says, dance like nobody's watching, love like you've never been hurt, sing like nobody's listening, live like it's heaven on earth. Dance like nobody's watching, love like you've never been hurt, sing like nobody's listening, live like it's heaven on earth. And I love that idea, and I'm going to take that as a challenge, and then ask each of you, are you willing to take that on? Are you willing to dance like nobody's watching, love like you've never been hurt, sing like nobody's listening? And I'm not referencing the choir members here, you don't count. And live like it's heaven on earth. What does it mean for a community? What if we were to more embrace and embody joy as a community during our worship services? If you look at the Black church, there's yelling, there's clapping, there's a lot of energy there. And I'm kind of envious of that energy. Because when you leave that place, if you go to a Black church service, the energy almost carries you out. And I imagine stays with you for many, many weeks to come, at least for the days to come. And I was doing a lot of work with Julica Herman de la Fuente, who is an anti-racist consultant within the Unitarian Universalist movement. And we were having these meetings to see how we could address white supremacy culture in the institutions of a predominantly white church. And I was saying to her, I just don't know how to address multicultural worship in the Unitarian Universalist context, because we want to stay authentic to who we are. And we wrestled with it, she and I, over this long discussion, and she said this one thing. She said, this Latina wants to be, she grew up in Mexico City, this Latina wants to be more emotionally expressive in Unitarian Universalist worship and wants it to be okay. This Latina wants to move. I thought, that works for Unitarian Universalist. I mean, because I think when I hear multicultural worship, do you want an hour and a half Black church sermon? Probably not. Do you want a Pentecostal Mexican high energy, speaking in tongues? No. So what do we mean by multicultural worship? I think we do need to find a way to be more emotionally expressive in our worship, and for that to be okay. It's okay for someone to get down on their knees and pray at a Unitarian Universalist service. It might make us a little bit uncomfortable, but that's on us, not that person. So we want to bring that movement. We want to embody spirituality in our very being. Woo! It worked! And I say this as much to myself as anyone else, because I'm a product of the white culture where I've got all these inhibitions, and I think it's work that we each need to do, and as a community we need to do, so that everyone can feel welcome here. Bring your emotions, bring your expressions. We do it during joys and concerns. That's as intimate as dancing in front of people. Where's the hesitancy there? So my wish for all of us is that we can enthusiastically and authentically be creators, receivers, seekers, noticers, and spreaders of joy.
And he's done others. Matt Harding, it's wonderful. You know, the video is where the hell is Matt? And that's the answer. He's everywhere. It's been created both before and after this one. This is one sort of in the middle. It always brings this, this delight that I can't quite completely say the why of. I think it's because, like Brian and Tracey have already said, there is a place in us that is made for joy, that transcends our grief and our pain and just how damned hard life is at times and now. And as the song from our hymnal says, joy and woe are woven fine, garment for the soul divine. And that dance, this dancing for joy, is a universal elixir. It's a transcending remedy. It's a healing balm for our sadness, for our grief, for our fear, for the life-sucking paralysis we feel when we are shut down by grief, by fear, by sadness, by woe. And so our hearts want to dance. We move when we are moved when we move. Thich Nhat Hanh says, sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy. And Matt's dancing badly, these things are called dancing badly, if you look them up. Dancing badly around the world was not something that could just be limited to him. No, what started out was a personal sojourn around the world for this young man. Recently unemployed in 2003, he bought one of the first digital cameras that could take videos and became an international phenomenon that eventually enlisted thousands and thousands of people to join him in the simple act of dancing badly. And the badly part was and is an essential component of the universal appeal to join the dance. Matt Harding himself has reflected on a TED Talk, I recommend it to you, that if he had been a professional dancer going on and doing this, essentially performing in front of the camera, it would have never caught on. But Matt realized about 3/4 of the way through his first trip around the world doing this, that by dancing badly, others could see themselves in the dance. You don't have to have it perfect to move. And they did, and they joined even without invitation. So when he discovered this, he shared his realization with his sponsors, a chewing gum company who was sending him all over the world for him to do this. They thought that was going to be a great marketing thing, I don't know. But what they really wanted was not just the novelty. He convinced them that what they wanted was not the novelty of one person dancing badly, but the power and the exponential ecstasy of seeing hundreds and dozens of people at a time joining in this ridiculous little dance that he made up that always sparked joy and delight wherever he went with his little digital video camera. And so they sent him around again, around the world, to other places, and again and again. And each cycle around the globe was causing joy to break out all over. And when he was told by the governments that he couldn't go to some places, like Syria or Palestine or the demilitarized zone in Korea, he went anyway. They said no. And he danced his way across the border, including, as we saw in this video, into the ocean to dance with whales, and the space training station to dance unencumbered by gravity into space, to dance badly where no one had danced badly before. That's our job, that's our calling. He was, without knowing it, engaging in what Adrienne Marie Brown calls pleasure activism. Adrienne Marie Brown is a social justice facilitator focused on Black liberation. She's a doula, a healer, and a pleasure activist. Living in Detroit, she's also the author of Emergent Strategy. Pleasure activism, she says, is the work we do to reclaim our whole, happy, satisfiable selves from the impacts, the delusions, and the limitations of oppression, supremacy, and trauma of all kinds, the things that shut our spirits down, that keep us from dancing. And pleasure activism can take many forms, but it always leads to movement and stems from the need to move through the pain, the trauma, to move with and towards the desire for greater freedom and justice and healing. Move up and through us and out into the world. And so another aspect of dancing badly in all of its forms is the liberation, the healing, the emergence of joy. It is another source of salvation from the pain and trauma of our systemic pasts, as well as the slings and arrows of our personal grief and fear and loss, and the isolation of daily life right now, especially in these times in which we live. And so this is what we want to leave you with today, that the change we seek, both the transformation of our own suffering and loss, and the struggles for greater justice in which we are and need to be engaged, will be most successful. We will be most successful when and if we can find our joy in the struggle, to be that follower, to follow the other followers. Leaders don't start out that way, right? A leader, like the videos told us, is made by followers, and followers follow other followers. So follow the follower in your life. Be the follower for others in your life. And especially this is true for us in those areas with every letter we write to the editor and each conversation we strike up with others about those things that usually are seen as difficult or controversial or unpleasant to talk about. We need to talk it up. We need to lead and follow in that change that's going to happen by breaking down those walls about taboo and I've never done this before. We can do this. So as the UU troubadour, poet, and friend of mine, Rick Maston, used to say, let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let our lives be a dance. And as iconoclastic as that sounds, movement is what we need. Movement through and around and all of us. I recognize that it may be difficult or uncomfortable to think about embodying this form, although you all caught on pretty quickly. But we've got to break that old fascia around our collective communal worship muscle that says that Unitarian Universalists are God's frozen people. Because the truth is, the tradition from which our heritage draws, the heritage of dance and movement, has been a long part of religious and spiritual practices, including some of our spiritual cousins. That tradition of dancing badly anyway and shaking ourselves awake has a long and varied history. The Shakers, the Quakers, the whirling dervishes, dances of radical hospitality and healing are part of tried and true practices that have been utilized and borrowed from and adapted and have made their way into surprising places. Take, for instance, that Shaker tradition of dancing to simple gifts. Do you know about this? Tis a gift to be simple. You shake out all that gets in the way of your joy. And that's what they did in that song. They knew that to turn would be a delight, and that they would eventually turn round. Right. whole and free. So when I was doing my research for this homily, I knew about the Shaker tradition because last week at UUSM, we ended our service with that song and dance of delight and turning as we began this month-long exploration of opening to joy. But this week I delved a little deeper and I discovered that this simple Shaker choreography was actually a source of another international dance phenomenon that matches or even surpasses Matt Harding's. The earliest accurate account so far, and I read this on the internet, so I know it's true, of this song we all know and love that I am purposefully not mentioning right now the name of, is from an account dated in 1857 of two sisters from Canterbury, England, on a trip to Bridgewater, New Hampshire. And during their visit, they were just talking and goofing around, but they taught the locals a song that they made up on their way that went something like this. I put my right hand in, I put my right hand out, I give my hand a shake, 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 and turn myself about. Now, I think you know what's coming. So I think you need now, again, wherever you are here in the sanctuary or there at home, rise as you are willing and able and get ready. But before we do, because I know you're ready now, let me just repeat again that there is a need in us to take the chance to both lead as we are moved and follow as we are led beyond our comfort levels and to join together in beloved community in lots of meaningful and frivolous ways, because that's what it's all about. So let's put our whole selves in and our whole selves out. You know what's coming, just the one time, okay? Put your whole self. You put your whole self in, you put your whole self out. You put your whole self in, and you shake it all about. You turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. Amen. Amen.
Yeah, that's next week. You can't have all the fun in one service. Well, talking about lacking fun, that's what I'm here for now. So I'm going to talk about one just thing. Ben talked about pleasure activism. And I think one of the things that justice can't just stay in our head, justice needs to be embodied, justice needs to take action. So we want to talk about some opportunities that are coming up. Many of you have heard about fixing San Mateo, and we've got some people in the room who have been heavily involved in that, Nancy and Ellen and David. So, well, it's a grassroots organization, Fixing San Mateo, and they need some help right now getting wider participation in an anonymous survey regarding our county sheriff's department through the San Mateo County. The objective of the survey is to understand what residents do and do not understand about the sheriff's office in order to inform the future formation of the Citizens Oversight Programme for our Sheriff's Department. An adjunct of our fifth principle is to affirm and promote the democratic process, both in our congregation and in the community at large. So we invite you all to please complete the survey. Ben, you're going to type it into the chat? Or I'll send it out this afternoon, so please complete the survey. We need more input there. And this is a great way for learning more about what a sheriff department does, because we have some grave concerns about the sheriff's behaviour, and we'd like to get people more informed. And the other thing that's happening, Faith in Action was mentioned earlier during Peter's announcements. On Tuesday, there's a big meeting with Faith in Action. I'm meeting the new mayor here in Redwood City, and this is an opportunity to come along and to really support our Spanish-speaking Latino siblings, many of whom are facing severe eviction. And we're really trying to address that with the mayor. So the more we can show up and support, sometimes our body, and we need to move our body in support of others. And this is a great opportunity on Tuesday. I will send more information out about that. I want to thank Barbie for being our leader with the dancing. Thank you, Barbie. And the followers, you took the courage, even inspired me to embarrass myself yet again. But that was a lot of fun. Thank you all for those who participated. And I know some weren't quite there yet, but I saw a lot more participation in the hokey pokey. Sometimes you just need to know the moves.